Shall we continue through the childhood trauma house?
Wow. It doesn't seem real.
It never does. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this.
Lights, no power.
There's a lot of stuff happening in this game so far. Machine repair. Tessa?
Alright, let's see. Broken shelf, broken jar, and the washing machine. Broken. The dryer never worked to begin with.
Marianne thought dryers were straight up evil. Energy hogs.
I hated hanging drippy laundry. I refused to change for a few weeks once, so I wouldn't have to do it.
Yikes.
We should take down the creepy masks if we don't want to scare the buyers away.
Oh, so now you don't want to scare someone with those masks.
Hey, I just put on the mask and pretended to be a warrior. You were the one who got freaked out by it.
Right.
Not that she ever let me wear him very long.
Okay.
This bathroom still smells like Marianne.
A good scrub and we'll be rid of that too.
We were so competitive about who measured taller. Like, we actually had anything to do with it.
And after all that, it ended in a tie.
Yeah, none of that crazy stretching I did made any difference.
Ah, great.
What would little Tyler think if he walked in here right now and saw me? What are we gonna do with all her jewelry?
Well, I'm certainly not gonna wear it.
Donation pile it is, then. Handmade soap. Still here after 10 years. Impressive.
You could say that about the entire house.
Wow. I forgot all about her weird concoctions.
And how she was always testing them on us. Like we were lab rats.
Get into the kitchen. Get us a knife.
String, glue, duct tape. The holy trinity of house repair.
True story.
Marianne loved having something to fix.
But not the part where it got broken. Especially if we were the ones responsible.
I know. I'm just saying she liked to save broken things.
What was she hoping to do with all these jars?
She used to barter for our clothes with homemade jam.
She tried everything to make ends meet.
Well, not everything.
Okay, we went through here. The separate room I will do later. I kinda wanna do the living room now.
She pinched every penny.
Hey mom, we are sorry the waistcoat broke. We didn't know you love it so much. We need to be careful and not act up in the window room. Next time we will try and use good judgment. Please forgive us for doing bad things. I'm sorry too. We should be more careful. I'm very sad we made you cry so much. We should play outside instead. I will tell Ollie not to be wild all the time. We aren't going to do it anymore. We are sorry. Oh.
What are you reading?
A letter we wrote her. To apologize for breaking that stupid vase, remember?
Bore your kids into good behavior. Great parenting strategy.
Old textbooks. Tessa gave them to us, right?
Yeah, she thought we were gifted.
What about you? You think you're gifted?
I wouldn't be here if I was.
What? Like, In this house with me?
I mean anywhere near here. I'd be working in Juneau or Seattle or something.
Yeah, I don't know about that, Allison. I don't know about that.
I don't remember these.
It's probably one of Marianne's unfinished masterpieces.
There's 2 of them. Maybe they were us. In some weird way that only made sense to Marianne.
Welcome back.
Wow. I'm so embarrassed for us. Mini Da Vinci's we were not.
She saved every drawing we ever did.
There's a couple of these I might keep. She took so many pictures.
Yeah. Like she had to document every second of our lives.
Oh shit.
You can keep some of them. If you want.
No thanks. I mean, I like the photos of us, but I don't think I can forget that she was the one aiming the camera.
That's fair. That's fair.
She was trying to save the planet way before Al Gore made it cool.
Has Al Gore ever made anything cool?
Nah.
I guess she was right about one thing, but you can't really blame anyone for not listening to crazy Marianne Ronan.
I didn't realize how much I missed the smell of firewood.
I miss the cold winter nights curled up here, with big mugs of hot cocoa.
Yeah. Marianne was so tired she was usually asleep on the couch.
Ah, that's why it was so nice. No Marianne.
That was the one time we were ever quiet. We knew she needed to sleep.
We all needed her to sleep.
Mom? About me joining the hockey team? Mom!
Sorry, what? Not now. Maybe next year.
But you promised!
Keep whining, and my next year will become never.
Can you cut my hair?
Your hair is fine.
But I want to cut it short. Really short.
What? Look, I'm tired, and I'm busy. Let's talk about this later.
You always say that.
Marianne said no to everything. Made me so pissed.
She was always on edge those last few months.
Yeah, and completely deaf to everything I was telling her I needed.
She pretty much always said no to me, too.
True, but it felt personal with me.
I see. Okay, let's go in here then.
Marianne's room.
Let's not go in there until we absolutely have to.
Agreed.
Really? Okay. Then let's not. Let's go upstairs. See what happens here. Nothing to say about this? Okay.
Where'd you come from?
What? A Tale of Two Swords. Okay. Okay.
If you don't come up soon, I'm gonna take whatever I want from our bedroom.
No way! Wait for me!
No, this feels like home.
Hey, the postcard we sent ourselves from Juneau.
Forever alone.
What?
We barely had any friends. We even had to be our own pen pals.
Hello, Alison, Ollie. We are writing from the past. What is it like in the future? Anyway, Juneau is super cool. We took the tramway all the way up. Ollie was scared. Liar. Got some books, but when we went to the restaurant at night and forgot them. It was cool. There were a lot of whales on the ferry. Oh, there wasn't. They were in the water, stupid. Anyway, there's a postcard to remind you how awesome we are. Especially me. And oh, Allison, oops. Okay. Oh, okay.
Hey, you.
Another one
I
of
just
you.
found your twin under the house. He's seen better days. Oh, this one wasn't mine.
Aw.
Look, it's the game we made, Lusion Tramway.
That game never made any sense.
Didn't stop us from playing all day.
Dude, we were kids. All we needed were rocks and bird feathers.
Dude.
Whenever we asked for a TV, she'd just bring home a big stack of books.
I think she did us a favor with that one.
You may not agree when we start digging into the HBO back catalog.
We'll see. Ugh. Some of our old toys give me the creeps.
Okay, what are you?
Look what I found!
What?
Only our greatest creation, the Book of Goblins.
Seriously? It was...
All these
Oh,
stories.
shit.
I had ideas for so many more.
Oh,
Marianne wrote a lot of them.
Yeah. It's one of the only times I remember her being at peace.
okay. The frog earns the right to speak. Am I? Yeah, let's read it. Why not? Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a big frog in a small pond. She was a peaceful creature who spent most of her time eating, swimming, and sleeping. From the morning to the evening, she did everything the smaller frogs did, except she did it bigger. She ate more, she jumped farther, she was smarter, and she made much more noise. Everybody in the forest could hear her loud croaking, and everybody was happy that they could. You see, it was easy to get lost in the forest, but thanks to the frog's loud noises, you could just as easily find your way back to her pond. Maybe it would not have been the same if the big frog had kept singing during the night, but she was much too lazy an animal to stay active after dark. One day, an unknown visitor came to the forest for the first time. It was a young woman, dressed in a beautiful gown. She was walking fast through the woods, as if she was running away, and she never looked back. Many eyes spied the princess pass by, but no one dared to help her, for the mad hunter was on her trail. "This is not our business," they said, and we had better look away, for the mad hunter was an unyielding man who loved nothing but hunting down prey for money and glory. Nothing could escape his piercing eye for long. So the princess walked alone, without help, until she was hopelessly lost in the big forest. Exhausted, she pressed on, with no idea where she was heading, as the hunter drew ever closer, dogged in his pursuit. She continued this way until she heard a heavy croaking, far off to her left, so clear and loud that the princess immediately made for the source of the noise. A few minutes later, she reached the big frog in the small pond, and the frog looked at her with a gentle smile. "Help me, please," said the princess. "I need a place to rest and hide." "Ribbit," answered the frog, and the princess frowned. "Please stop making noise. The mad hunter is after me." "Ribbit," says the frog again, so loud that the princess had to cover her ears. The creature began to jump every which way. "What are you doing?" asked the princess. "Stop all that noise or he will find us." But the frog kept croaking and jumping around her, left and right, up and down, ribbit, ribbit, until the princess understood the meaning of all his fuss. Cautiously, the woman climbed on the back of the big animal, and then, with a leap, the frog set off away from the pond. The frog jumped up so high and far that even the hunter could not find where the princess had gone. With a few jumps, the princess was out of his piercing eye. A few jumps more, and she has vanished for good. The princess closed her eyes and let her clever mount carry her wherever the creature pleased. Less than an hour later, the big frog had reached the other side of the ancient forest, near the shores of the very deep lake. There, she landed without a noise in front of a big wooden house that had been abandoned. "Thank you," said the princess, covering the animal's snout with kisses. "I only wish you could speak, so I would have understood what you were trying to do sooner." As she pronounced those words, something incredible happened. The big frog was suddenly able to speak. The first words startled the princess. "The mad hunter is always at my heels. Now you're safe, and I've had my revenge. You can stay in this house. It has been abandoned for a long time, and no one will look for you here." Then, without looking back, the big frog jumped back to the pond. And this is how the big frog saved the princess, and how she earned the right to speak. Oof, that's a story and a half. That's a story and a half for sure. Okay, next story. The Bear and the Princess. Okay, so those are our princess stories. This might be just an hour of me reading all this stuff. So let's go. Once upon a time, in the ancient and deep forest, the old bear stood on the bank of the river, swiping at salmon on their way to the spawning ground. Just as he'd got his paw on a particularly fat one, he heard a woman shouting for help. He considered simply eating his salmon, but then she screamed again, and he lumbered over to investigate. After a short walk, he found the princess clinging to the top of the tree, while a wolf snared and snapped at the base of the tree. Old Bear would normally not get in the middle of such a situation. After all, as a fellow predator, he understood the wolf's need to hunt. But when he saw the princess, he was struck by her beauty, and he knew he had to help. With a great roar, the bear heaved onto his hind legs, rising it to its full height. The wolf snapped and snarled in his direction, but the bear roared again, and the wolf took off into the trees, tail between his legs. The old bear fell back down to all fours and stared up to the princess. She regarded him fearfully. "You can come down," he said. "How do I know you didn't save me just so you could eat me yourself?" asked the princess. "I suppose this is a fair question," admitted the old bear, "but I promise I won't eat." The princess had no reason to trust the old bear, except that he had kind eyes, so she slowly made her way down the tree. When she reached the ground, the bear only watched her, and so she supposed she was not going to be eaten today. "Thank you," she told the bear. "Of course," he said. "Can I walk with you back to your home?" "Of course," said the princess. And so the princess and the old bear walked together through the forest back to the big wooden house. After that day, the princess would occasionally find gifts from the bear. Fresh caught salmon, a handful of ripe berries, a newly bloomed bluebell. One spring, when a sudden thaw flooded the path out of the princess' house, the old bear was there, and she rode his back across the river. The old bear began to think that the princess should be his mate. After all, she had no mate, and she needed one. And he could keep her warm, and provide her a much more suitable den, and catch fish for her, protect her from wolves. She, in turn, would brush out his fur and pick berries without smooshing half of them, and scratch that one part of his back he couldn't reach. And with how she took care of the goblins, she would be an excellent mother for his cubs. One day the old bear came with a ring of spruce and asked the princess to be his bride. "I'm sorry," said the princess. "You are a very good friend, and I appreciate all you've done for me, but I cannot marry you. You are a bear, I'm a princess. It would never work." "Yeah, I know, right?" The old bear was crushed. "Can we still be friends?" he asked. "We will always be friends," said the princess, "but I will never marry you." The old bear and the princess carried on their friendship, and after 1 year, he tried again to ask her to be his bride, but once again she refused him. This happened 1 year later, and 1 year after that, and finally the princess said, Old Bear, you are my dear friend, and I appreciate all you have done for me, but I would sooner you have left me to the wolves than marry you. And that is how it will always be. I have my hands full with the 2 goblins who live under my house. They are all I need. That wounded the old bear deeply, but it was finally enough to stop his proposals. They remained friends, and he continued to give her gifts of fresh salmon and ripe berries and newly bloomed bluebells. But the old bear never asked again, Princess to be his bride, much as he might have wanted to. And this is how the princess befriended the old bear, and how she refused him. Okay, I see where this is going. So, okay. So we are about to get through a lot of stories. I'm gonna read through all of them, I think, and just probably, yeah. Let's see how long it takes. Like, there are gonna be a lot of stories if all the tabs on top of the book will be a story. So, oh boy. Let me take a sip of water real quick. Okay, there we are. The beaver fishes the house. No, not fishes. What is it? Fixes. Okay. That's the one. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. One night, a particularly violent storm shook the house. It shook the shingles on the roof and the planks in the walls. It even shook the beams on which the house stood, blowing the whole thing to the ground. The princess hid in a closet, fearing the house would come down on her as she slept. In the morning, the house was still standing, but it was badly damaged. The storm had blown shingles off the roof and planks off the walls, and even bent a post upon which the house stood. The first 2 things she could fix, but the last concerned her. What will I do? Despaired the wise princess. For though she knew many things, she did not know how to fix the big wooden house. Just then, the old bear came to see by the princess to see if he had any trouble in the storm. When he found her nailing planks back into place, he said, Stop, princess, let me do that for you. I'm happy to do it, said the princess. But if you want to help with the roof, you may. When the pair were done with the roof and the walls, they examined the bent support pole. I could throw my body against it, said the old bear. I am very large. He stretched up onto his hind legs, being sure the princess would appreciate how very large he was, then charged straight at the post. He threw his body against it with an impressive thud. The impact moved the post, but too far, and it ended up bent the other direction. The wise princess decided more precision was needed. He thought then of the very old beaver, who kept an excellently crafted dam. Perhaps she can help. She went looking for the very old beaver and found the industrious animal hard at work, slapping down mud on a part of her dam that had been blown apart in the storm. Most of the structure was unharmed because the beaver was very good at building things. The princess knew he had come to the right place. Beaver, she said, my house was damaged in the storm. Would you help me fix it? I believe I could do that, yes, said the very old beaver, and she paused at fixing her own den to follow the princess. The very old beaver examined the big wooden house and nodded. It will be an easy fix, she said, and she set about righting the post with the loud slaps of her tail. When she was done, the wise princess stroked the beaver's head. Thank you, beaver, she said. The wind blew the shingles off the roof and the planks off the wall, even bent this post. Now thanks to you, I still have a home. Think nothing of it, said the very old beaver, who returned to work on her own den once again. That winter, the very old beaver grew ill, very ill. She was not able to fix her den, nor gather food. When the princess found out, she set about delivering meals to the beaver. She brought stews of corn and beans and baskets full of bark and twigs from the beaver's favorite aspen. One day, the wise princess noticed that the beaver's den had begun to fall apart. She set about fixing it, and though she was not talented as a very old beaver, The fix kept the creature warm and dry. Thank you, said the very old beaver. Of course, said the prince. I had that everything is sad after the thing. You can mix it up a bit, please. Thank you. Maybe that's intentional. That's probably intentional, because he's not a proper writer, I guess. Anyhow, moving on. You helped me when the storm blew my house near to the ground. Thanks to you, I still have a home, and I'm happy to do the same. The princess continued to nurse the old beaver until the day she came to the dam, and the forest was still. No birds sang, no branches rustled, no small things skittered within the underbrush. Oh, said the princess, staring sadly at the dam, for she knew the bold beaver has passed on. Goodbye, my friend. And that is how the very old beaver saved the big wooden house, and how the wise princess repaid her kindness. The princess's party. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the princess was melancholy, because it was the 1-year anniversary of when she had to run away from home. Sensing her sadness, her forest friends showed up at her door. They were headed by the pelican, fierce and attentive, and organized by the moose, stalwart and farsighted. The old bear was there, with his claws so sharp, as well as the big frog prattling away. Even the haughty muskrat, who almost never had time for anyone, had come. The bear invited her to ride on his back, promising no wolf would harry her path, and that the animals led her to a fairy glen, where a fabulous party had been prepared. Nice, Jules. Good job. I can't wait for tonight. There was a buffet of seafood the pelican had served from her never-emptying beak. The air was filled with winking fairy lights the moose had arranged. Afterclouds filled the sky, and the gregarious frog mixed up fizzing drink. Only the muskrat had done nothing in particular, watching off everyone else's hard work. The princess had a very good time at her party, such a good time that she forgot to say thank you to any of her friends. Noticing this, the fairy devised a bit of mischief. When the princess went to open her gifts, she found 3 identical boxes at the edge of the glen. Puzzled, she turned back and gasped. The entire party has went. Because you have taken your friends for granted, called the naughty fairies. We have hidden them for you, but we like games. Guess who has given you each of these presents, and you will get your friends back. The princess opened the first box. Inside there was a torch. When lit, revealed the truth. Said the princess. Someone wants to make sure I don't get lost in the woods when it's dark, and that I always see right from wrong. Which one of my friends would give me a gift like that? She opened the second box. Inside there was a magic sword, which would leap right out of the bearer's hands to defend them. Said the princess. Someone wants to make sure I am protected if I'm under threat. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that? She opened the third box. Inside there was a bag of coins that always provided money if it was for something the bearer truly needed. Someone wants to make sure I have money to buy food when I'm hungry, and clothes when I'm cold. Which of my friends would give me a gift like that? The princess thought about her friends, and then she smiled certainly. Fairies, she said. I may have been thoughtless, but I appreciate all that my friends have given to me, all they have done for. She gave her answers, and the vexed fairies were forced to restore the party in a flash of colorful light. One by one, she gave the animals a hug, sure, and thanked them for the presents, party, and all they had done to help since she'd moved into the forest. That is how the princess celebrated her first anniversary in the woods. The Goblins and the Ice Cave. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblins were playing near the glacier when they discovered a hole in the ice. They crept through a gradually widening passage and found themselves inside a spacious ice cave. Light spilled down the undulating blue-white walls in a way that made them look like electric waterfalls, and a column made up of hundreds of icicles stood in the center. This was a time before the goblins had settled beneath the old wooden house, and they had nowhere to live. Perhaps we could live here, they said excitedly. Moments later, the sound of stomping feet interrupted their play. They realized that perhaps someone already lived here. They hid behind a boulder to wait and see who was coming. The old bear sauntered into the cave, shaking powdery snow from his coat. He let out a giant yawn and lay down in the corner on the pile of tree boughs, snoring within seconds. When they were sure he was deep asleep, the goblin conspired to claim the cave for themselves. They chipped away at the glacier until they had filled a basket full of ice, then hid once more behind their boulder and started tossing chunks of it on the sleeping bear. Now, Old Bear was not the smartest creature in the forest. So when he woke up, covered in ice, he roared, "My cave is collapsing." Then he lumbered to his feet and ran outside before the whole thing could come down on top of him. The goblins crept out after him and did a loop before coming back to find him sitting outside. "What happened?" they asked. "My cave is collapsing," moaned the old bear. "And it's time for me to hibernate. Where will I stay for the winter?" It had not occurred to the goblins that the old bear had settled in for the winter. They felt a little bad. But they did not want the old bear to know what they had done, so instead they offered to help him find a new den. Together they searched. They inspected cavernous stone and hollow trees, and deeply pocketed knolls. Nothing they found was as beautiful as the ice cave, but the old bear settled on a packed car, then hollow that would keep him warm and dry for his long sleep. "Good night," he yawned. The goblins gleefully returned to their new home. In the spring, the old bear woke and went for a long walk to stretch his legs. His path took him right up to his old cave, where he heard the curious sound of laughter. Making his way inside, he was surprised to find that his cave was intact, and the goblins were inside, playing a game. "What is this?" growled the old bear. I said it again, burr. Bear. The goblins stopped playing and looked ashamed. "We are sorry, old bear," said the goblins. But we had nowhere to live, and it's just so beautiful. We didn't realize you were about to hibernate, and then we couldn't bear to tell you what we'd done. The old bear was angry at the trick, but the young goblins looked appropriately ashamed, and so he said, "Come with me." He led the crafty goblins into the hollow in which he had hibernated for the winter. "You two can have this spot," he said, "and look. Someone had built a big wooden house right over top it. No one lives there now," said the old bear. "But one day maybe someone will." The earthen hollow was not as beautiful as the ice cave, but it kept the goblins warm and dry. They were excited that someday they might have someone living overhead. Someone who baked cakes and tolerated their mischief. That is the story how the crafty goblins tried to steal the cave of the old bear, or they got their own instead. The Princess and the Two Thieves. Oh, I think at this point we all know where this is going. Like, this is all rather, you know, we know what's up here, right? Okay, 1 second, please. Okay, there we go. The Princess and the Two Thieves. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. The house was built from the strong wood of the forest. It kept the princess warm and safe. The princess was not a native of the forest, but she never spoke about where she had came from, for it made her cry. She did not have many friends, but that was how she liked it. The forest was big and deep, and many paths led to her house, but not many visitors passed by. The princess was happy to be left alone in the big house in the forest. She knew that the forest would provide for her, but that its generosity had to be respected, so she only took what she needed. And for a long time, love was just fine for the princess in the big wooden house. One winter day, when snow blanketed the earth and ice bent the trees low, the wise princess realized that food was disappearing from her house. It was not much at first, only a few fruits and nuts and eggs vanishing through. "Maybe it's the birds," she said, "or the mice." For a time, the princess was okay with losing some food, for the winter was long, little creatures needed to eat too. But then small items started to disappear as well. Spoons and plates, forks and knives and blankets. It was as if every time she was in one part of the house, something disappeared in another room. That can't be birds or mice, said the princess. I think I have a thief. So she went outside to look for traces and noises in the wind. But there was nothing to be found, nor to be heard. That's strange, said the princess. Maybe the thief is hiding inside my house. For many days she hunted, looking behind the curtains and under the bed, in the attic and in the chimney, behind the poles and under the carpet, but she found nothing. As she searched, food kept on disappearing night after night. I will make a cake, frowned the princess. Big cake with every egg and fruit and nut I still have, so that I only have one thing to keep my eye on. She spent the whole day making the cake and using everything she had left. Terrible. The cake she made was big. She could hardly carry it. If I managed to protect the cake, I'd be able to survive the long winter. So she added a lock to the oven. She kept the big cake safe inside. But the next morning the lock had been opened and the cake had disappeared. At first the princess cried because that cake was the last of her food until the snow melted. But then she noticed 2 trails of tiny feet in the spilled floor, and she followed the tracks to a hidden hedge in the floorboard. This is how the princess realized that 2 tiny thieves were living under the wooden house right below her feet. Princess makes new friends. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a wise princess in a big wooden house. She had been living alone just for a very long time, until the day she noticed food and small items were disappearing from her house. The thefts went on and on until the day her last cake, which had been made from the last of her eggs, the last of her fruit, and the last of her nuts, the last of her flour. Well, that last cake was stolen too. That was a sentence and a half. What the fuck? Jesus Christ. Okay. And all she found at the scene of the crime were 2 trails of tiny feet in the spilled floor, leading to a hidden hedge in the floorboard. The princess did not try to open the hedge, nor did she try to break in. Lady needs to go grocery shopping. I mean, I guess. She was too tired and too hungry. All she could do was cry in silence, along in the big wooden house hidden in the ancient and deep forest. She cried for a long time, until evening arrived, and then she cried some more. Suddenly a tiny voice came from under the house. What is that noise you make? We do not like it, not one bit. I'm crying because you 2 are mean to me, whoever you are. You stole all the food I had, and I will starve before the end of this long and cold winter. The hedge opened just a peep, revealing 2 frowning faces peering out from the darkness of their hideout. But we are hungry too, said the second creature. We have been hiding in this cave for a long time, and now the winter is upon us and we need food. The princess dried her eyes and smiled at the 2 goblins. If we were friends, we could share the cake you stole from me. The 2 thieves sat and smirked. Friend? What is that? The princess frowned, for she realized that the 2 tiny thieves were as lonely as she was. A friend is someone you love and care for, someone you would never hurt. We never hurt each other. We care for each other, said the goblins at the same time. Does that mean we are friends? Yes, that's exactly it. And if we were friends, you would not hurt us. Of course not. Friends trust each other. The goblins shook their little heads. We trust no one, for no one trusts us. Their words made the princess cry again, for now she understood that the 2 creatures were not only as lonely as she was here in the big wooden house, but they had been lonely since they were born. You are making that noise again, frowned the goblin. Please stop that, for it makes us feel unhappy. Are you a witch? Is this some sort of magic? It makes you unhappy because we are friends, said the princess. But we don't know you, and you are not like us. Sometimes friendship comes right away, even between people who are very different. Does it mean we can't steal from you anymore? Yes. But that's what we do. We are the crafty goblins who live under your house. Well then, maybe we could arrange some. Is that what friends do? Yes, I believe they do. And this is how the princess met the crafty goblins and how they become friends. Oof. Man, so much reading. The lore, though. The big lore. Okay, one sec. Is it though? Is he? I mean, he kinda is, yeah, though. Yeah, I can see it, actually. Okay. The bear's big paws. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the old bear was out looking for a snack, when he spied a bee's nest in a hole right up a tree. The tree was dry and brittle, but the old bear was hungry, and so he made his way to the nest. But when he got there, he found his giant paw could not fit in the hole. Determined, he tried to force it inside, but the effort caused the branch below him to snap. The old bear tumbled to the ground and landed with a painful oomph. He lay there, stunned from the fall, when all of a sudden something bit him. The bite was followed by another and another and another. Carpenter ants were swarming up his legs. You see, they had been resting in the branch, and they did not appreciate being forced from their home. The old bear howled and jumped to his feet to dance around as he swatted and snapped. But his big paws couldn't do much about the tiny arms. When he finally managed to squish and scare them all off, the old bear heard someone laughing. The crafty goblins had seen the whole thing. Clumsy old bear. Clumsy old bear, they teased. Those big old paws aren't good at anything, are they? Then they sped off, leaving old bear's pride hurting just as bad his body. He lumbered through the forest, hungry and sad. Maybe I'm just a clumsy old bear, he moaned, and my big old paws aren't good at anything. At that moment, the old bear had heard a sad, bad noise. What's that? He wondered. He followed the sound to where a mountain goat stood atop a boulder high up the hillside. Old bear, she cried. Old bear, please help, my kid is stuck. Sure thing. A tiny mountain goat was trapped inside the stones, bleating sadly. Bleating? I don't know. The old bear began to walk toward them and then stopped. I'm probably just going to make it worse, he thought. But then the goat kid started to bleat even louder, and old bear put away his fear. He climbed up to where the goat was trapped, careful of where he stopped and trying to not think of how he had just only fallen out of a tree. Every now and then the ground would slide away from under his feet, but he kept going. When he reached the goat kid, he put his mighty paws against one of the boulders and began to push. At first it didn't budge, but he dug in and pushed even harder. Finally the boulder parted just wide enough to let the kid scramble to safety. The old bear released the boulder and let out a roar of triumph. Thank you, gushed the mama goat, and she and her kid bounded off up the mountain. The old bear watched them go with a smile, and then made his way back down to the hillside, wiggling his rump in triumph as he went. To his surprise, the crafty goblins waited at the bottom of the hill. We saw the whole thing, they said. We were wrong. You aren't just a clumsy old bear, and your paws are good for helping others. The old bear forgave the goblins for doubting him, because he had doubted himself just as much. He never again thought his paws weren't good at anything, even though sometimes they weren't always great at everything. And that was how the old bear proved that his heart was bigger than his paws. The Moon Hag loses her name. Once upon a time, in a deep and cold lake, ancient forest, there lived an old seal who was a powerful witch in disguise. She was mean and cruel. She liked nothing more than to swim in the deepest part of the lake, where the light was dim under the ice, admiring the corpses of the many victims dragged into the water over the years. She was so hateful that only the cold water of the lake could keep her cool. Her most prized possession was a tin mirror sold to her by the secret keeper, and she kept it in a chest at the bottom of the lake. It was no ordinary mirror. If you looked in it, you would see a reflection of who you truly desire to be. And for 1 hour, the mirror granted you the power to appear as that person. Whenever a boat or a unwise traveler approached the edge of the lake, the old witch used the mirror to appear as the beautiful woman she always wished to be. With this disguise, she lured the unfortunate sailor or wanderer into the deep and cold water. There, the old seal forced the victim to become her servant, and when she was done with them, they joined her collection of corpses in the deeper part of the lake. One day, when the old seal swam down to her den under the lake, she discovered that someone had stolen her mirror. The chest where she kept her most prized possession had been forced open, and now it was empty. Who would have committed such a crime? Who had dared to deprive her of her only treasure? The old seal went mad, and her anger heated the water of the lake around her. For a time, everyone was happy with the temperature change, but the weather suddenly became sweeter and the air warmer. But after a few weeks, things started to get ugly. First, the fish began to die off when they could not live in the hot water. Then the glaciers began to melt and the water of the lake spilled out, flooding the forests and the meadows. And finally, the weather grew so hot that even the Ice King himself was awakened from his long sleep and decided to see what's going on. In the deepest part of the lake, he found the Mad Witch, steaming among the corpses of her victims, so angry that the lake was about to boil. It only took a few minutes for the Ice King to understand what had happened and demand that thieves present themselves before him. The thieves had no choice but to appear, but no one dared to disobey the Ice King. The crafty goblins presented themselves, mirror in hand. "Why did you steal the mirror?" asked the king. "We were curious. We just wanted to see what we really wanted to be," apologized the goblin. "But the stupid thing is broken. We look the same." "That does not mean it did not work," smiled the Ice King. "Now apologize and give the mirror to me, for it is too powerful to be used by thieves or a mean old hag." The goblins apologized and gave the mirror to the Ice King, but the old seal was still angry. "And what about me?" she asked. "I have been deprived of my treasure and I demand compensation." The Ice King frowned as he spoke again. "Old hag, you are mean and cruel, but I concede you have been wronged. For now you will be allowed to leave the lake and walk the earth as the hag you really are, but only when the moon is full. And you, goblins, you had better stay away from the lake, for I won't protect you from the moon hag's wrath." This is how the two goblins forced the moon hag to change her name. We're almost halfway through. The goblins trick the Mad Hunter. Once upon a time, in a castle beyond the ancient and deep forest, the Mad Hunter was punished by the Gold Lady for failing to return the Wise Princess. "For your failure," said the Gold Lady, "I will take your left hand. You will return to the ancient and deep forest and hunt the Wise Princess. If you can bring her back, I will return your hand to you. Fail again, and I will take your right hand." The Mad Hunter could hunt with just his right hand. But if he lost both his hands, he would never be able to hunt again. He would no longer be a Mad Hunter, but only a madman. So the Mad Hunter returned to the ancient and deep forest, searching with his piercing eye for the Wise Princess. The crafty goblins were out searching for mischief when they saw the Mad Hunter on the prowl. "We cannot let him find the princess," said the goblins, so they devised a plan. It was wash day, and the princess had hung a beautiful gown out to dry. They stole it from the line and stuffed it full of straw, and then returned to where the Mad Hunter was scouring the path of the forest. As the hunter turned down a path that would have led from the big wooden house, the goblins danced to the straw princess in and out of view in the opposite direction. The ruse worked. The hunter fixed his piercing eye on them and followed. Through the day and into the night they led him away from the true princess. As night fell, the crafty goblins realized the error in their plan. The Mad Hunter was now hunting them. If he caught them, he would not be kind. So they put their heads together to come up with a plan. It did not take them long enough to realize where they should go. It did not take them long to realize where they should go. They led the Mad Hunter to the edge of the deep and icy lake. When he came into view, they weighed the fake princess down the stones and dropped her into the frigid water, careful not to plunge her into the depth themselves, lest the moon hag take her revenge on them. The Mad Hunter removed his clothing and dove in after the fake princess. He followed the shape of the sinking princess deep into the chilly water, down below where the ice covered the lake's surface. Finally he caught her, but when he spun her toward him, he realized she had no head, and that her body was stuffed with straw. Then he felt a slippery fin brush his shoulder as the moon hag loomed overhead. The next morning the princess went to retrieve her gown from the clothing line and found it was gone. She immediately suspected the goblins of mischief and called, "Goblins, did you take my gown?" The goblins emerged from the cave and nodded sadly. "Now what would I wear?" asked the princess, sad and angry that she lost her only dress. "Let us explain," said the goblins. So they told the princess the story of the Mad Hunter. Then they produced his clothing, which was a bit large for the princess, but much warmer than her beautiful gown. She immediately forgave them. "Thank you, my friends," she said, "for rescuing me and for this clothing, which will keep me much warmer in the winter than my beautiful gown." The Mad Hunter was forced to remain below the lake with the moon hag, but she did not kill him, because even reduced to just one hand, he was too useful a servant. Though he plotted the day he would emerge to once again hunt the wise princess and earn back his left hand. And that is the story of how crafty goblins rescued the wise princess from the Mad Hunter. This is I like this story. I think this is my favorite of the bunch so far. The Pelican helps her friends. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, an early winter storm blanketed everything in snow. It was so early in the year that the creatures of the forest were not yet ready for an ordinary winter, much less a bad one. Everyone agreed the storm was a sign of the Ice King had plans for a long, cold winter. The princess had grown up in a kingdom where it was sunny all year long, and the goblins were very young, so no one in the big wooden house knew how to prepare for such a winter. The house was not well insulated. They did not have enough fuel or food. Only the pious pelican noticed their plight. And when it came time to fly south with the other birds, her heart was heavy with sadness. "What can I do?" she thought. "I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to stay, who would look after my flock?" The time came and go. The pelican struggled to take flight. It felt as though the leaden weight was struck right in the center of her chest. "What can I do?" she thought. "I'm a migratory bird, and if I were to..." we had this. She managed to take off, but only just barely, flapping fiercely to catch up with the other bird. As the pious pelican began her journey, the storm picked up, battering her to and fro. She had fallen well behind the flock. She was already growing tired, but for all her challenges in the air, she could tell things were much worse on the ground. A deep freeze had settled over the forest. The leaden weight on her chest grew heavier as she thought of the princess and the goblins. "What can I do?" she thought. "I'm a migratory bird, blah blah blah." The storm intensified and the pelican was in a total whiteout. She knew she should have despaired, but all she could feel was the weight, which had grown and grown until she thought she might drop out of the sky. She had felt called to help the princess and the goblins, but she had ignored it. "I should have stayed," she thought. "It was the right thing to do. Now I'm lost, with no way to make it right." Suddenly she was plucked from the sky and deposited in the hall of the Ice King. "Pelican," he said, "you were flying in circles around my mountain." "I was lost," she said, weighed down by the weight of guilt in my heart. The Ice King stared at her sagely. "Is it guilt, or is it something else? Open your beak." He reached down inside of her, pulling out a glowing stone. The pious pelican was surprised at how it filled her with warmth, chasing away cold and her doubt. You know what you must do, said the Ice King. The Pierce Pelican flew straight to the big wooden house. Snow had already blown in through its many cracks, and ice crept across the floorboard. She found the princess and the goblins huddled in front of the quiet hearth, nearly frozen solid. No, she cried, and then she placed the stone in the princess's lap. The warmth of it spread through the whole of the house, melting all that had frozen. The princess threw her arms around the pelican's chest, and the goblins clung to her legs. Thank you, they cried. You are welcome, said the pelican, smiling in deep satisfaction. What is that? Asked the princess, staring at the wonderful stone. At first, said the pelican, I thought it was my guilt, but when the Ice King pulled it out of me, I realized it was something much more powerful. Just then, the storm broke and the skies cleared. The pelicans filled with the big wooden house larder with food from her beak, and she took to the skies, lightened by the knowledge that through her charity, everything in the big wooden house would be warm and fed until spring. And that is the story of how the Pierce Pelican saved the wise princess and the crafty goblins from the long winter. The goblins earn their voice. It's gonna be interesting. Once upon a time, in the deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblins spied on the secret keeper as she made her rounds, gathering up secrets that the animals of the forest had for sale. How, said the first goblin, does she get people's secrets? Do you suppose she peels open their heads? Let's find out, said the second. And so the goblin watched the secret keeper. They watched her until the stalwart moose came to her, head hanging low. It was my fault. I chose the uneven trail. I can't bear to remember. The secret keeper nodded and gazed into Stalwart Moose's eyes. Though the goblins couldn't hear anything, they knew she was speaking to the moose, for the secret keeper spoke in people's minds with the gift of the voice. After a few minutes, the stalwart moose blinked. I feel lighter, said Moose. Did I just give you something? The secret keeper nodded, handing him a coin. The stalwart moose nodded and trotted along down the trail. He spied the goblins hiding in the woods and narrowed his eyes, for he knew the goblins were often up to mischief. The two goblins whistled innocently, and the moose was forced to carry on, because they were not doing anything obviously bad. I need to know what the secret was, said one of the goblins. Let's go buy it. So the goblins approached the secret keeper before he could stow away Moose's secret. We want to buy Moose's secret. What do you have to trade? Asked the secret keeper, their voice filling their minds. The goblin produced a silver-handled hairbrush they had stolen from the princess, and the secret keeper nodded. That is how the goblins came to know that Moose's mate had tumbled down a cliffside to her death. The secret keeper moved on. The first of the goblins said, I want to know more, so the goblin followed the secret keeper, hoping to find where she hid the secrets. They followed her to the peak of a nearby ridge and watched as she stowed the rest of the day's secrets high in a cloud. When she had gone, they climbed in a high spruce tree and disappeared into the misty sky. They reached out and just managed to dip their hands into the clouds. Their heads were filled with memories. They snatched their hands back out, as if they had just thrust them in boiling water. Tears poured down their cheeks. That was how the secret keeper found them, crying in the tree. You stole my secrets, breathed the secret keeper. Give them back. The crafty goblins stopped crying because they saw an opportunity. What will you give us in exchange? They asked. I will give you back the silver-handled hairbrush, offered the secret keeper. For so many secrets, you'll have to offer more than that. What if, said the secret keeper, I shared the gift of voice? The crafty goblins grew excited. That will do. So the secret keeper shared the gift of voice with the goblins. Immediately they found that they could hear one another's thoughts, feel each other's feelings. The crafty goblins gave back to the secrets they had taken and ran back to the big wooden house. There they found the princesses preparing food. Princess preparing food. They tried to peer into her mind, but they found it was blank. They tried to speak to her using only their own minds, but she could not hear them. It seemed the secret keeper was craftier than the crafty goblins. for she had only shared enough of her power to let the goblins use the gift of voice with each other and not with the whole forest. That is how the goblins stole the gift of voice from the secret key. But why they could only use it with each other. The big frog is punished. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, there lived a big frog in a small pond. She was no ordinary frog, for she had been given the gift of speech when she saved the princess from the Mad Hunter. From the morning to the evening she did everything the other frogs did, except that she knew how to speak. Everybody in the forest could hear her loud voice, and everybody was unhappy with her, because she never stopped babbling. She babbled about the too hot sun and the too deep pond, about the rain to come and all the delicious flies she had eaten. Across the forest all the creatures tolerated the endless noise, until one day... I don't know? Is there an audio issue? I can't tell, sadly. Hold on, give me 1 second. I'm gonna check. Let me open it on my phone and see. It's gonna be awkward, but whatever. Just have to open the fucking thing. I mean, it would be terrible if the audio was fucked up and I was like reading all the shit. That would be terrible, honestly. What exactly is up with the audio? Twitch needs a fucking update on my fucking phone, I think. Everything sucks. Okay, hold on. It's possible that you hear me now. So I don't hear anything bad. Yeah, I think there's nothing on my end. My voice is clear on the phone.
Ah,
Oh
where
shit.
is it?
You looking for something in particular?
My diary.
You never told me about
Is
it.
this normal
Yeah.
for you?
With the way Marianne was, I tried extra hard to keep it a secret. Marianne. Yeah, that day she found out about it.
Okay, sorry. We have to keep reading. So yeah, from what I can hear on my phone, everything is alright sound-wise, so am I still robotic for you then? Eh, that's weird. Again, on my phone everything is fine. Huh? Now you're making me paranoid. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna check the recording then. That's like 1 hour in. Yeah, we'll just keep going then. I'll check the recording afterwards. We're gonna finish reading all of this and then end the day. Streaming, so we are here for another half an hour or so. Just reading shit. Then, how does this game save, Jules? Do you know that? Okay. Where were we? Yeah, ask the big frog to quiet it down. I can't, said the big frog. This is what I do. Before the princess kissed me, I croaked all day long, and you all liked that I did. This is the same, except you can understand what I say. And now you find it irritating. But I can't change what I am, can I? Could you? All the creatures agreed that she was right, and that it was rude of them to ask the big frog to stop doing what she has always done. So they turned into their own parts of the forest and let the big frog do what frogs have always done, chomping and talking some more, about the too hot sun, the too deep pond, about the rain to come, and the delicious flies they have eaten. And for a time it was alright, but in the forest, word travels fast and everyone has a story to tell. Autosave. I mean, picking up the book should be the autosave, right? Like, we're not doing anything else, right? So maybe we look the memory and that's it. That should be autosave, maybe. I don't know. Anyhow. The big frog, who she was, gossiped and gossiped about everything she overheard. She told the bees that the old bear had stolen their precious honey 2 years ago. And she told the beavers that the eagles had stolen their precious wood. She told the deer who had killed her fawn and she told the tall spruce who had carved the cuss word into its bark. Once again, everyone in the forest asked the big frog to keep quiet, for now everyone had a grudge against everyone else. But once again, the big frog would not listen. When I was just a frog, you never paid attention to me. Nobody helped me when the Mad Hunter hunted me for sport. This is only a right for a wrong, and I won't stop talking. The fuss went on, and the noise was so loud that the Ice King himself awoke, and decided to see what was going on. Silence, bellowed the king, and even the big frog stopped babbling. Once the forest was quiet again, the Ice King patiently listened to what each and every animal of the forest had to say, until finally he made his mind. Big Frog, you have abused the gift of speech, for you have only used it to get revenge. Despite knowing that words can be hurtful, you threw them around without caution, and you caused too much trouble. The big frog opened her mouth to protest, but the Ice King raised his finger before she could say another word. Since you received the gift of speech for a good deed, I would not dare to take it away from you. So here is your punishment. I will tell you the biggest of my secrets. It is a secret so powerful and dangerous that it will frighten you. But you ever reveal it to anyone. The Ice King bent down and whispered such potent words in the big frog's ear that the poor creature started to tremble. Now go on about your business, all of you. Try to forget what the big frog told you. For you all are living in the forest, and you have nowhere else to go. This is how the big frog irritated the Ice King and how she was punished. Oof, okay, sure. The goblin sold the old beaver. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, winter gave way to spring in a sudden burst of warm air that melted all the snow and all the ice all at once. The river swelled until it could no longer hold all the water in. Then it spilled out to create new rivers in places where no one was expecting them. The whole of the forest went into a panic, looking for shelter from the rising waters. The very old beaver had been working on her dam. One of those new rivers came crashing right at her. She screeched and squealed, but whatever direction they ran, more water appeared. She was caught in the flooding, and though she had once been an excellent swimmer, age had taken its toll, and so the raging water carried her off at speed she couldn't control. "Help!" she called. The crafty goblins had been running back to their cave under the big wooden house when they heard the beaver's cries. "We have to help the beaver," one goblin said. "You go one way, I go the other." They ran, keeping in touch with the gift of voice. Finally, one of them spotted her, twisting and tumbling in the river. But she was on the opposite side of the water, and the goblin could not reach her. "Brother," the sister goblin called out through the gift of voice. "I see her, but I can't get her. Maybe you can. I'll try." The goblin guided her brother so that would hit the river in just the right spot to reach the beaver. The plan worked, and soon the second goblin appeared just in the right spot. "Beaver," he shouted, holding out a branch, "grab a hold of this." The beaver grabbed it, but in her panic she pulled the goblin in too. "No!" cried his sister. She ran as hard as her legs could go, managing to outpace the river and get ahead of the beaver and her brother. Searching for some means of getting them out, she spied a low-hanging branch. They'd slip by it quickly, but if they were fast enough. "Brother," she cried out through the gift, "you're coming up on a low-hanging branch. You'll slip by it quickly, but if you're fast enough—" "Got it," said her brother, and then he said to the beaver, "Get ready to grab a hold of a low-hanging branch. We're going to slip by it quickly, but if we're fast enough." Suddenly they were right in front of it and reached out, snagging hold. Though the water beat against them, trying to shake them loose, they pulled themselves along the branch, back to dry land. When they are safe, the very old beaver thanked the goblins. "But how," she asked, "did you know just where to find me? How did you know that the branch was coming?" The goblins shared a secret smile. "Just lucky, I guess," they said. And that is how the goblins saved the very old beaver from the flooding river, and how she never know how they did it. The goblins irritate the Ice King. Oh boy. Here we go again. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient wood, the crafty goblins were getting into all kinds of trouble. They had woken up in a particularly mischievous mood that day. There was not a single denizen of the ancient forest who they did not manage to pull a prank on. They left a mud pie in the princess's kitchen, so that when she dug in, she got a big mouthful of dirt. They used paint to draw silly pictures all over Moose's antlers while she slept. They told the Morgy Muskrat that his coat had been returned to his former glory, which made him very sad when he rushed to the water's edge and found he was in fact still mangy. They stole branches from the very old beaver's dam in order to have a sword fight, and they felt the old bears stand with birth. Every time they ran in with a fit of giggles, never stopping to consider whether their jokes had done any harm. They were on their way to fill the Pious Pelican's beak full of bubbles when they were hoisted into the air by their legs. Though they thrashed and shouted, they found themselves staring into the face of the Ice King. "All morning," he said, "I've been hearing complaints about you. They're just pranks," said the goblins. "No one has really been hurt." "Oh no?" asked the Ice King. He forced them to see how each of the victims of their pranks was doing. The princess had a stomachache from swallowing the mud. The moose's antlers itched terribly where the paint had touched them. The muskrat was crying, sad at being reminded what his vanity had cost him. The very old beaver's den was flooded, and the old bear was trying to get the burrs out of his throat by finding most of them hopelessly tangled. "For your punishment," said the Ice, "you must help each of them undo the harm you caused. If you do a good enough job on this, there will be no further punishment. If you do not, you will have to give me your noses, so that you can no longer stick them into other people's business." Now, the goblins liked their noses right where they were, in the middle of their faces, so they set about making things right. They baked a real pie for the princess and brewed her a tea that would settle her stomach. They scrubbed the moose's antlers clean and then covered them in soothing mud. They sat by the river with the muskrat, listening as he talked in great detail about his old coat. Then they did their best to point out all of the things that were still handsome about him, like his broad whiskers and the sparkling eyes. They let the very old beaver rest a while and repaired all the damage done to her den. Then finally they removed every burr from old bear's fur, even the ones that were hopelessly tangled. In the end, they came before the Ice King to see if they had done enough. The Ice King surveyed the forest and found that everyone seemed to be back to normal. "What did you learn?" asked the Ice King. "That our pranks can make people feel bad," said the goblins. The Ice King smiled and nodded. "Yes, actions have consequences." Yeah, I can't wait for my consequences tonight. Holy shit. D&D will be fun. Anyhow, in case you forget, I'm going to leave you with a reminder. Whenever one of your pranks is going to hurt someone, you are going to feel a little pit in your stomach. That will be your punishment and your warning. So every time after that the goblins set out to do prank that went a little too far, they felt a little pit in their stomachs. They were forced to consider whether it was the right thing to do. This is how the goblins irritated the Ice King, and how they were punished. Pelican forgives the goblins. Oh god. Okay. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, there lived a pair of crafty goblins in a cave below a big wooden house. They lived with a wise princess, who shared as much food with them as she was able, but it was never quite enough. This left the goblins hungry, very hungry, always hungry. One day they were foraging for food. The Pious Pelican landed on a rock and dumped a smorgasbord from her beak, which the goblin knew was magic and never emptied. There were king crabs in red, blue, gold, and scarlet, veiny blue shrimp, pink shelled scallops, oblong brown clams, purple spinny urchins, and even one prickly red sea cucumber. The food just kept coming. They watched as the pelican ate one clam and then took a nap. "Do you think she would mind if we just took a little?" asked one goblin to the other. "Her beak never empties. She won't possibly miss a couple of crabs." said the second, licking her lips. They were agreed, and so they crept over, filched some crabs and ran. The goblins scarfed from the crabs, but when they finished, they found that they were still hungry. "You won't miss a handful of shrimp," said one goblin to the other. The goblins scarfed the shrimp, but when they finished, they found that they were still hungry. "Maybe also a few scallops?" said one of the goblins to the other. The goblins scarfed the scallops, but when they were finished, they found that they were still hungry. So they were back for clams and then urchins, and finally even the sea cucumber. Finally, they were not hungry, but there was also nothing left. Just then, the pelican woke up. "What happened to my food?" she asked. Unable to lie about it, the goblins confessed their crime. The pelican was dismayed, but she was a charitable-hearted bird, so she could tell the crafty goblins were growing little creatures. "Goblins," said the pious pelican, "I will share my food with you, but you must, in return, follow my example and be generous with others as I am with you. Take that to heart, and I will have considered your debt paid." "But we have nothing to give," said the goblins. "You have your nimble hands, and your crafty brains, and your loving hearts," said the pelican. The crafty goblins realized how much they had to give, and for the rest of the day they looked for ways to help the other creatures of the forest. They found the stalwart was struggling with an itchy, hard-to-reach spot on his back. So they climbed up and gave it a good scratching. Next, they helped the old bear, who could not get the honey out of a narrow beehive. They climbed up to the top of the tree with the hive, and then dropped it, cracking it open. Finally, they found the princess, crying over a loss she would not speak about. So they rubbed their little arms around her in a big hug and stayed until she felt better. When they were done, they returned to Pious Pelican. "Did it feel good being as generous as I am?" asked the pelican. "It did," said the goblins. "I'm glad," said the pelican. "We all have problems that we can't solve on our own. But if everyone goes about with generosity in their hearts, then there is always someone on hand to help. But we all must commit to do so, or there may be no one there to help you when you need it." This made sense to the goblins, and they thanked the pious pelican for her food and the lesson. Of course, by this time they were hungry again, and that remained an ongoing problem until the day the stalwart moose taught them to fish. But that is another story. This is how the pious pelican forgot the crafty goblins, and how she taught them charity. The goblins meet the ice troll. Once upon a time, in an ancient and deep forest, the crafty goblins were awake long after they should have been asleep. One goblin said to the other, "Let's go explore the forest." Now the goblins were not in the habit of exploring the forest late at night, and they did not know what they would find, but this did not scare them off. They crept out of their beds, bundled up, and went exploring. It was dark. The light of the moon was just enough to keep them from walking into trees, but they could not see more than 15 feet in front of them. Every time a twig snapped or branches rattled, they considered turning back, but they didn't. And so they have ventured far beyond the house into a part of the forest they were not familiar with. When they realized that the snapping of twigs and the rattling of branches had become steady, something was following them. They turned to run, but a hulking figure emerged from the darkness, sweeping them up with a giant hand and stuffing them into a burlap sack. The goblins wiggled and cried out, but the sack remained shut as their captors stomped through the forest, singing, "Whittle-diddle-dum, whittle-diddle-dee, in this bag is a meal for me." After a lot of thumping and thudding, the bag opened and the goblins were dumped into a giant iron pot full of warming water. A huge troll stood overhead, grinning down at them through long, brushy white eyebrows. "I am the ice troll, and you are my dinner. Be ready to cook the goblins," singing, "Whittle-diddle-dum, whittle-dee-dee, there's soon to be a soup for me." Finishing his ditty, he bent over to stoke the fire beneath the pot, and let out a loud noise of pain, rubbing a spot on his back that always ached, but that's a mood. The troll stood painfully and walked over to a stone shelf, where he began to chop potatoes. One of the goblins had an idea. She whispered to her brother, "Follow my lead." The goblin stretched out in the water, floating a Latin out sigh of contentment. Ah, said one of the goblins. This is the most relaxed I've ever been. My body feels so good, I think I could run 100 miles without stopping, said the second. The troll peered at them. They weren't supposed to be happy about being in the cookpot, but they certainly looked like they were. Troll, said the goblins. If your back is hurting, you should try sitting in the water, just for a little bit, before it gets too hot. The troll stomped over. But if I take you out, then you will escape. There will be no soup for me. Put us back in the sack, suggested the goblin. Then we can't run away. This made sense to the troll. The spot on his back that always ached was still bothering him, and the goblins couldn't go anywhere if they were trapped. So he stuffed the goblins back in the sack and climbed into the soup pot. He stretched out and let out a sigh of contentment. Meanwhile, the goblins threw themselves around in the sack until it began to swing. The troll was so relaxed he didn't even notice. The bag dropped onto the shelf where the troll had been chopping potatoes. The goblins pushed it against the edge of the troll's knife, sawing a hole. Then they made a break for it. The troll finally noticed what they were doing and roared out in anger. But he was so relaxed, and when he tried to chase them, he tumbled out of the cookpot and into the flames, catching his bushy eyebrows on fire. The goblins ran and ran and ran, as fast as they could through the ancient and deep forest, until they were back in the cave, safe in their beds. They vowed never to venture out in the ancient and deep forest late at night again, for they did not think they'd get lucky as to trick the ice troll twice. And that is the story on how the crafty goblins met the ice troll, and why they never did again. Okay, 1 second please. Okay, there we go. The goblins trick the muskrat. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient wood, there lived a muskrat. The muskrat was a lazy, cowardly creature who did little but lay around in the sun, cleaning his beautiful coat until it shone. One day the muskrat found the crafty goblins playing King of the Mountain on his favorite rock. He was too cowardly to confront them directly, and so he retreated to a safer distance, and then pitched a stone right at the hornet's nest hanging overhead. One of the goblins saw him do it, but before she could say anything, the hornets emerged, furious, and chased the goblins away, stinging them. With the rock empty, the muskrat claimed his spot. When the goblins returned, they asked the muskrat, "Why did you do that?" "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, turning away and ignored them. The goblins knew that the muskrat cared for nothing but his coat, so they devised to steal it in order to teach him a lesson. As the muskrat lay in the sun, he spied the goblins strutting by. Their skin was covered in flecks of gold. "Goblins," asked the matter, "what happened to make your skin shine that way?" "When we were attacked by the hornets, we ran and ran until we found a pool by the glacier. We dove in and then came out this way. Would you show me this pool?" asked the muskrat. The crafty goblins led the muskrat to a pool. The muskrat looked at the pool skeptically. "It looks like a pool," he said. The goblins chuckled and shrugged. "You don't have to jump in if you don't want to, but what do you lose if you try? And if it works, why, you will be the most beautiful creature in the world for the whole of the forest." With visions of his splendid coat in mind, the muskrat jumped in. When he emerged, he was disappointed to find that nothing had changed. Said one goblin. "Maybe you have to be stung by the hornets first, just like us." The muskrat hesitated because getting stung would be painful. Seeing his hesitation, the goblin added, "If it works, it will be the most beautiful creature in the whole of the forest." The muskrat decided it was worth it, so he turned to the hornet's nest and pitched a stone right at it. The hornets emerged, even more furious this time. They chased the muskrat, stinging him repeatedly until he jumped into the magic pool. The muskrat was disappointed to find that, once again, nothing had changed. "I wonder if the magic only works on us," said one of the goblins. "Would you like me to jump in with your coat?" The muskrat hesitated. If it works, he will be the most beautiful creature in the whole of the forest. With visions of his splendid coat in mind, Muskrat agreed. He slipped it off and handed it to the goblins. Without his coat, the muskrat was pale and covered in scrubbing welts. Instead of jumping in the pool, one of the goblins ran away with the coat, laughing. The other pushed Muskrat into the frigid pool, and the water splashed the goblin. Goldflex ran, revealing that they had only been painted on. The muskrat cried, so pitiful and made such a clamor that he awoke the Ice King, who came down to the forest to see what had happened. When the Ice King saw the muskrat, he laughed, only further infuriating the creature. "Tell me what happened," said the Ice King. Both the muskrat and the goblins told their sides of the story, and the Ice King considered the case before him. "It is true that the muskrat is vain, and he thinks of nothing but himself," concluded the Ice King. "But he needs something to keep him warm in the water and the snow." So the Ice King was decided. The muskrat would get his coat back, but it would be patchy and unkempt. After that day, he became known as Mangy. This is how the goblins tricked the muskrat into giving up his coat, and how he got his. The Moose teaches the goblins. Once upon a time, in a deep and ancient forest, the crafty goblins were hungry. This wasn't unusual. The goblins were always hungry, but today they were particularly hungry. I hate this one. They opened the wise princess's cupboards to look for a snack, but all she had was a small pile of nuts and berries and just one strip of dried fish. The goblins grabbed it all and gobbled it up, but they were still hungry. They went out into the woods to look for more to eat. First, they dropped by the small pond. The big frog was asleep, and beside the pond was a pile of insects she had caught for eating after she woke up. The goblins crept up to the pile, carefully not to wake the big frog. As they got close, he rebitted loudly and they froze. But the big frog kept sleeping. So they grabbed up the pile of insects and gobbled it up, but they were still hungry. As they crept back into the woods, they found the stalwart moose watching them. "Did you just steal the big frog's food?" The goblins tried not to look guilty, but failed. "She said we could have them," he cried. "Oh, really?" asked the moose. "Let's ask her." The moose woke up the big frog and asked, "Did you say the goblins could have your food?" The big frog looked at the goblins, who she knew were always hungry, and nodded. "Yes, I did." "Really?" asked the moose, surprised. The frog nodded, and the moose sighed. "All right then," he said, and he had to let the goblins go. The next stop was the river. They watched as Old Bear swiped at a leaping salmon, catching it deftly in his large paws. He lay it out upon a rock and left it to dry, lumbering into the woods to seek out some berries. The crafty goblins crept up to the rock carefully in case Old Bear returned. They reached the rocks, grabbed the salmon, and gobbled it all up, but they were still hungry. As they crept back into the woods, the stalwart moose was once again waiting for them. "Are you going to tell me Old Bear said you could have that?" "Yes," replied the goblins. Old Bear ambled up at the moment, and Moose asked him, "Did you leave that fish for the goblins?" Old Bear looked at the goblins, who knew they were always hungry, and nodded. I did, he said. "Really?" asked the Moose. "Really," said the Old Bear. After Moose left, Old Bear said to the goblins, "Be sure to tell the princess I was kind to you. Don't steal my fish again." The goblins, still hungry, went out looking for one more meal. They crept up to the mangy muskrat's lodge and began to climb inside when they were dragged right back out. The stalwart moose dangled them by the seats of their pants and said, "Now, I know Mangy Muskrat didn't tell you could eat his food, because he blames you for his coat being ruined. Besides, he barely has enough for himself and doesn't share with anyone." The goblins began to protest, but he shook his head. He set the goblin's son and said, "Come with me." The goblins followed the stalwart moose to a part of the river where it ran slow enough for them to walk into safely. He gave them each a fishing line and said, "I'm going to teach you to fish, so that when you are hungry, you do not need to steal from the animals in the forest. It will be hard work, but it will be honest." The crafty goblins were not against working hard. They were just hungry, and so they listened to Moose, and soon pulled wiggling fish out of the river. They ate them and up, and finally they were no longer hungry. That's a pretty sweet. Okay. Last story, the Mad Hunter gets his hand back. Once upon a time, in the deep and cold lake near the ancient forest, there lived an old seal who was a powerful witch. After angering the Ice King, she had been bound to the lake, allowed only to venture out when the moon was full, and only looking like the hag she truly was. For years she dreamed of vengeance, all alone within the deep lake, among the corpses of her many previous victims. One night she awoke to see a black and hooded silhouette clawing to reach a beautiful gown of full stone. The human had delved far deeper into the lake than any land dweller should have been able to go. His tenacity and ferociousness impressed the moon hag, and she decided he would be wasted in her statuary of corpses. She used her magic to unspell him, allowing him to breathe underwater, but also binding him to her service. You, she said, will be the instrument of my release and my revenge. For you and I together will kill the Ice King. The moon hag had never heard of the Mad Hunter, and she did not know the power he wielded. She could only tell he was a hunter, and her lust for revenge blinded her to the threat he posed. She gifted him a hand of ice, was not as nimble as a hand of flesh, but allowed him to serve her better than no hand at all. The moon hag spent years devising the perfect plan to kill the Ice King, and years more moving all the pieces into place to execute it. In the meantime, the Mad Hunter served her, guarding her chest of treasures and plotting his own plot. Finally, everything was prepared. The full moon rose, the moon hag stepped on land, giddy at the thought she would never have to leave again. And if it did not please her. She brought the Mad Hunter to his post, a jagged peak of ice and stone, from which he would loose the arrow that would slay the Ice King. Before she could go, he put forward a proposal. Moon hag, said the Mad Hunter, if you grow back my missing hand, I would be certain to hit the Ice King with my arrow. You will have only one shot, and I would hate to miss. You are a powerful witch, so you will be able to break craft checks to bind me to this place and that I cannot break. The moon hag considered it. All right, I will grow back your hand, then bind you here with the ties that will not break. She cast the spell, and the Mad Hunter's hand of ice was replaced with a hand of flesh. As the witch left to complete the next part of her plan, the Mad Hunter grinned wickedly in the moonlight. After a short time, the moon hag returned, luring the Ice King into Mad Hunter's line of sight. What is this about, moon hag? Asked the Ice King. Many a long year have you bound me to the lake, said the moon hag. Many a long year have I been alone in the dark. That ends tonight. She cast a powerful spell that made the Ice King slow to react, and then gave the signal. Mad Hunter, she cried, let your arrow fly. Nothing happened. She twitched nervously. Mad Hunter, she growled, let your arrows fly. Still nothing happened. The Ice King meanwhile was striding toward her slow but furious. The moon hag fled, running first to the jagged peak of ice and stone where her servant should have waited, but the peak was empty. The ties had been broken, and the Mad Hunter was gone. For in the end, he was the more powerful of the two, especially once he had two hands. When the Ice King finally caught the hag, his furious voice could be heard throughout the forest. For your wickedness, you will be eternally bound to the lake. You will no longer be allowed to leave, not even under full moon. The moon hag was imprisoned in the lake, and she never again tried to escape. This is how the Mad Hunter escaped to the moon hag, and this is how he got his left hand back. Ooh, that was a whole bunch of reading, guys. Oh man. Okay. Let's make sure we make it to the next checkpoint. The save point, I should say.
Mom? Mom! Mom, where is it? What did you do with it?
What now?
I can't find my diary. I know you stole it. Give it back.
Sweetie, whatever I do, it's just for your benefit.
You read it, didn't you? You had no right to do that.
I have the right to do whatever I need to protect my little girl.
I'm not your girl. I hate you.
You will always be my little girl. And no matter how hard you fight me, I'll fight twice as hard to keep you safe.
I don't know how I never saw it coming. She told me right to my face. She was willing to hurt me, to keep me from transitioning.
Tyler, there is no way you could have known she'd go that far.
I want my diary back. Her room was the only place I didn't look.
Okay, but do you need to get it, like, now?
That diary was important to me, Allison. Writing down my thoughts helped me realize who I am.
Well, then let's go find it.
You think her room is still locked?
It always was. I'm not looking forward to going in there.
I know, but we'll have to eventually, and I need it back.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we looked at almost. Okay, let's look around the room anymore, and then we should be fine.
How did you convince me to let you put this up?
It was my favorite movie. Back then.
So much for my dream of being a hockey star.
Marianne thought sports were too aggressive, too competitive, and too groupthinky.
Group thinking.
You know, if there's one thing you gotta give Marianne, it's that she let us explore our artistic side.
You should have seen Eddie's face when I tried to repaint his car.
Yeah, I bet Uncle Eddie didn't appreciate your artistic touch.
I'd rather you called him Chief Brown if you're gonna be an ass about it.
Yeah, that's gonna be a thing too if we encounter Eddie. Okay, we got this one too. Yeah, I think we should be fine now. Yeah, this was a whole lot of reading today. I didn't plan that, but you know, it has to be done. It has to be done to get the, I don't know, not even the big picture, but like the rough idea of the setting and stuff. So I'm really glad we did this, even though it was like took a bit longer. Like this, yeah, it's fine. Like it was important to me to read that out. So if you're not interested in this, you can just fuck off, I guess.